Alexandra, some people including these new provisions, still have a right to be served in English. Can you tell me who these people are and why they get these exceptions from the law?
So the charter has always provided for the ability of Quebec, Canadian citizens, I should say, who have either undergone their primary schooling, the majority of their primary schooling, uh, or were entitled to. That's what we call the notion of ayant droit, so as of right people. And so those are recognized as the traditional Anglophone community of Quebec or the rest of Canada. And those persons are entitled still to services in English from the Quebec government when they are interacting with the government as an individual. As soon as they're interacting in a business capacity, they lose that right. So you're a small business owner and you want to apply for a permit, even if you're recognized as an Anglophone and entitled to individual services, you're not entitled to those services when you're acting through your business. The other exemption is in respect of First Nations and recently landed immigrants. So for the first 6 months after they enter the territory, they're entitled to services in a language other than French. But once the 6 months are up, they lose that entitlement.
So,
Well, I think
Julius, what do
something
you want
has
to add to
said
that?
about that. It's a preposterous thing. The so-called historic Anglos, based on the right to educate children in English. For instance, I have that right. I was an immigrant, but I was in English school long enough to retain the right. But what is peculiar is that my wife, who's a French Canadian, has the right because of me. So she could be an old Anglo and make a claim to being served in English, whereas people who have lived here all their life but don't have that right, people from English-speaking areas, the United States, Britain, the islands, they don't have the right. It's absolutely absurd. Now, what is also very disturbing is that that right appears to be given very parsimoniously, and people are going to prefer not to use English. There's a general feeling we don't trust them. They won't give us the same service. They might investigate whether we really have the right or not. So people are not, even if they really can't express themselves in situations which are very serious, like being before the courts, being before the tax people, being in the health system, they will not do it for fear of not getting services. And generally, most people simply do not trust that there's going to be fairness.
Now, Julius, I want to ask about this requirement on small businesses to disclose the number of employees that they have that cannot communicate in French. And that disclosure is actually made public. So what exactly is the purpose of that provision? What's the purpose of making it public? And what, especially if these are not customer-facing employees? And additionally to that, I mean, there's already a widespread labor shortage across Canada in a lot of, especially low-wage jobs. So how can the government be justifying this requirement in the face of that labor shortage?
Officially, they're going to tell you that they're just compiling statistics on the use of French. But in reality, the purpose is to discourage the hiring of Anglophones. People are going to be afraid to have to disclose to the government and to be sued afterwards if somebody is not served, if some person can't answer them in French. And so the purpose really is to make it very difficult for somebody who doesn't speak French well to stay in Quebec. And of course, more and more people who are not in my position of a sort of really bilingual family working in both languages, but many of my Anglophone friends are simply saying, our children are out of here. Nobody's going to stay. Because you can't be certain that there will be a just attitude towards them.
Alexandra, anything on that, on the disclosure purpose and the impact on businesses that need to hire people when there's already a shortage?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I agree with Julius on that. I mean, time will tell. This is new. The stated intention is quite clear: is that the government, with the amendments, have created a new organization called Francisation Québec, and the purpose of that organization is to offer language training in the workplace. And so the official line is that this is a compilation that allows Francisation Québec for companies that do not have the obligation to already report this information to the regulator because they have at least 50 employees in Quebec. So for those smaller businesses, this is the government's stated intent, a way of measuring which businesses need the services of Francisation Quebec in terms of having a very high proportion of people who in their workforce who don't speak French.
We've got to go to break, but we'll be right back.